Well, hey guys, hope everyone is having a wonderful night. Tonight is a little different, um, as normally, we have Ebony and Ivory on Wednesday nights on spiritual growth, but Tammy tonight is traveling due to a funeral that she had. So you guys are just with me tonight, and so I decided to still go ahead and come on. I decided that I was still going to do this and to be a part of it. And so, hold on, I think I'm having technical difficulties. Um, Hold on one second. It's telling me that there's technical difficulties, so. Alright. Hopefully I'm still live. Am I still live? Okay, I think I still am. All right, so tonight on it, so I decided I am Megan Marie, and I am a mental wealth health. I am a mental wealth health wellness coach. And so I thought I'd come on if people aren't aware of who exactly what my story is. So I was raised in a narcissistic environment. I was raised by two parents who were unable to regulate their emotions. I grew up in a house filled with physical, mental, emotional, verbal, sexual, and financial abuse. I married a narcissist because that was my normal. That was what I knew. And it really wasn't until, I didn't leave my marriage because of the actual abuse. I left my marriage because I was lonely. I was unhappy. There was so many desires that weren't met and my needs. And I started to recognize so many of those things. And the actual abuse didn't become noticeable until later as I actually started to heal when I had separated myself from that and realizing just how abusive it was on all levels, and then also being around my parents who I hadn't had a relationship with for years, and just it was just constantly in my face, and it really made my whole world collapse. It just made me realize that I was living in an illusion and in my own healing. Now, I have always studied the human condition. I've always studied psychology. It's my passion, but I always stepped away from it because of the fact in Western psychology it's about labeling and it's about diagnosing, and I just never felt aligned with who I was. But it still is my passion and it's still my purpose and it's still what I believe is my calling. So, I kind of stepped outside the box and I went, the spiritual route, which was really a lifesaver for me. I am a Reiki master. I'm certified with crystals and chakra healing, sound therapy, Reiki. And then I moved more into the actual mental health, going and getting a mental health wellness diploma certification. I am certified in traumas, dissociation, and psychiatric disorders. I do hypnotherapy, TFT, EFT practitioner, and also EMDR on eye therapy. And so that is a little background, a little story on who Megan Marie is. And so I do offer coaching. It's one-on-one coaching. I have an 8-week program, which is called Chaos to Peace, where I walk you through and I guide you. I am, a lot of people don't go through their healing journey. They don't go through because of the fact it's too hard. And really, in my own healing, I wanted someone to hold my hand. I wanted someone. I really was looking for that person with the magic wand who was just going to come and heal everything, but that never happened, and it doesn't happen. You have to do the work, and so that's really what my purpose and my mission is to help other people get to their purpose, to see the light, to find out who they are, live to their true potential, get rid of the demons that are in your head, And I do believe that it can be done in 8 weeks. And so I do have that program. If you're interested, send me a DM, Thrive, so that we can be thriving in life. So what I kind of wanted to come on tonight is about, with that is what exactly is a fully functioning human being? Most people, think that they are a fully functioning human because of the fact that you're just living. You're just living day to day. But are you? Are you really living? Or are you defined by your past? Are you defined by circumstances? Are you defined by other people's opinions? Are you defined by other people's behaviors? Are you trapped in your own behaviors? And you're not aware of things, of patterns, of the frequencies, of how you've attracted these situations or people into it. And are you chasing a dream, or are you stepping into your purpose? And so that kind of made me think of, how do you become a fully functioning human being? So, you can either define yourself as a broken person. You can define yourself as a label of, you've been to a psychiatrist or, any type of mental health behavior, and they diagnosed you as anxiety. They've diagnosed you as this or that. And you know what? You can fully, and many people do, and I myself once did as well. I lived to that label. It was a justification. It was an excuse to me, for the behaviors that I was portraying. It explained why things, but or you can change your view. You can change your perception. Your mindset is so important, especially in a healing journey, as to where you are and who you are. That you can either be that you are a broken person, or you can look at yourself as that, you're imperfect and that you're learning and you're growing. You're adapting, you're, becoming more into you. And I like to look at it that way, is that, we all have imperfections. At some point we are all broken, but we have to manage to put our pieces back together. And so how do you do that? How do you become a fully functioning human being instead of just walking mundane all day, just, day in and day out? And really, the first thing is that you have to, accept your experiences, the negative, the good and the bad. You have to accept them as part of who you are, part of your purpose, part of your being. We can't avoid the negative. There is always going to be negative, and within that, you have to ask, what is your purpose? What are your current conditions in life? What is it that you are, seeking, in your life, in life in general, your work, your social, your circumstances? Where is it that, you're not happy? Where is it? And so many people, I think, get trapped in the fact of that we want to be happy. Well, of course, everyone wants to be happy, but we can't be happy all the time. Those are the emotions in life. Sometimes you're going to be angry. Sometimes you're going to be sad. Sometimes, you're just going to be depressed. Sometimes, you have to go through those emotions. But, seeking only happiness, that you hear a lot of people talk about the roller coaster of life. Well, always trying to be happy, you're putting yourself on that roller coaster. You're putting that because of the fact that happiness is an emotion. It's a feeling. It's not a purpose. It's not a driven as emotion. It is a feeling. It is an emotion that comes in. And so the fact of the matter is that we have all these other emotions. So if you're constantly I just want to be happy. I just want to be happy. Really you're putting yourself on that roller coaster, because of the fact that you're going to have those sad moments, you're going to have those angry moments, you're going to have those. But if you're constantly, going up and down with them, it's a roller coaster. And the reality is that you put yourself on that roller coaster, onto it. But it's also, how do you define your relationships day to day? Does it just go into being the happy? But you have to honor, your first step is you have to be open to the past. You have to reflect. You have to live it all, and that was a hang up for me in my spiritual journey, because of the fact that, it was really like, I've already been through all this crap. I don't want to go back through it. And you have to, because you have to go back and you have to honor all those circumstances that made you who you are. But you have to not let them define you. And I think we get stuck up sometimes on defining us as those labels onto it, and those keep you stuck. They keep you stuck in a condition of, well, how do I move past this? How do I move forward? And that's by living, and that is by, learning to live from your past, learning that your trauma doesn't define you, learning that it's a journey, learning that you are imperfect, accepting, forgiving yourself, that, you made mistakes, or no one's innocent. So you have to, learn to live with that, learn to with those so that you can live in the present moment, not in the past and not in the future, because a future is not, a future is not promised to us. A future, we have to have goals, we have to have a vision onto it, but think about how many people who, had all these dreams and all these visions, and unfortunately they died never reaching them onto it. So you have to learn how to live in that present moment. You have to learn to really truly go after what it is that you want, and the actions and the steps that you take daily by, setting intentions of, I'm going to better myself. And, it's a learning process. Self-awareness. Self-awareness would be the next step that you have to be able to acknowledge your roles. You have to become aware of your own actions. You have to admit your parts. You have to, it's accountability in many ways of, that, yeah, maybe I acted this way, and I acted this way because someone else did this, but that's blaming. That's justifying your reasons, but realizing that you can learn from that. Learn that, okay, well, I didn't like how that made me feel. I didn't like that situation. I didn't like that circumstance onto it. Now, I acted this way, yes, because of this, but it's because it triggered me because of XYZ. And you have to be able to sit with that, and you have to do that. And, it's really beautiful once you start to become aware of your own actions, negative and positive, because, there's always a negative and a positive. You start to see other people in a different light. You start to see other people, and you become aware a little bit more. You start to see things. You see true meanings behind comments. You see different things the more that you acknowledge your own faults, and forgive yourself. It's a hard process. I'm not gonna lie. It's a very difficult process because there's a lot of circumstances where it's like, I didn't deserve that. I didn't deserve that to happen. Well, no one deserves to have bad things happen to us. Sometimes you are, just because of circumstances of people you hung out with, but, guess what? That's also a learning experience of, well, maybe you shouldn't be hanging out with those people. Maybe that happened because you were hanging out with these people, and maybe the universe was trying to tell you, stop hanging out with those people. And that's why these type of situations necessarily keep happening. And so you have to look at that, and that's becoming aware. Like, what is aligned with you? What is it that you desire? What is it with your visions? And do the people who you are hanging out with, who are the people that you keep company with, and yes, as many people do not like to hear this, your family, because just because they're family does not mean that they have the best intentions for you at all. The truth is, most of the time, the people that hurt you the most are the closest to you. And, you have to honor yourself and love yourself and say, you know what, I'm done. For myself, that was one of the best things that I ever did, was when I finally said enough is enough with my family. And it didn't matter who they were. It didn't matter that they were my parents. The fact was, I wasn't their punching bag. I deserved more. I deserved, parents who, loved, honored, and cared for me. And not to say that, they didn't, but they surely didn't show. They surely didn't make me feel that way. And I always felt like crap around them. And I wanted better. I deserve better. I'm an amazing person. But being around them did not make me feel good. So, it's honoring and it's listening to your body on that. No matter who the person is, you have to, it is about you. It's about yourself in many ways. And then, becoming, creative, creative expression. I think a lot of times people don't look at the fact that, what you don't express gets suppressed. And what does that do? That goes in, you'll hear people talk about, I talk about chakras onto that. Well, anything that you push down into your body, it causes you to be out of balance. It causes, emotional distress. It causes mental distress. It causes physical, well-being, because of the fact it eventually starts eating away. There's a lot of health conditions and stuff like that that can be linked to certain chakras. And if you really look at a lot of the stuff, it's what are you suppressing? What needs to be expressed? What needs to be expressed that you're holding in, blocking those energies, blocking that flow, blocking that creative, blocking, your channels onto it. And we need to learn how to do that in a creative way. It doesn't mean to be explosive. It doesn't mean to go have a raging fit and that because of the fact that you've suppressed this. No, you have to learn a creative outlet. Music, sound, drawing, writing, poetry, reading. There's so many different ways, but you have to get it out. You have to get that expression out of you. And then the next second is, what is your fulfillment? What is your peace? What is it that, you are, happiness is that emotion. Okay, great. You're seeking that emotion, but what is it that fulfills you? Because happiness comes and goes. It's not, it's not healthy to always be positive. It's not healthy to always be just one thing. You're flatline, you're stuck onto that. So you have to, what is it that your personal growth for progress onto it, and that goes into what are your beliefs, what are your worldviews of the fulfillment of who am I, and then, looking at all those, what are your current conditions, how do you define yourself, your day-to-day relationships, your beliefs, your worldviews, and then how are you fulfilled? And then you have to compare those, to your ideal conditions. What is your desired outcome in life? What is your vision? What are your dreams? What are your goals? What can I accomplish? What aren't you giving yourself credit for that, deep down, you can do on it? And then who can I become? And then what is the legacy you want to leave? What is it? Who is it when you do leave this earth? What do you want people to remember about you? And, looking and comparing all of those to what your current conditions are versus your ideal conditions. And then these steps, you have to take steps. You have to take action. You have to, because there's a gap. And that's what a lot of people don't realize, and where I think a lot of people give up, is that you have these current conditions and you have these ideal conditions. But what is it here? What's that boomerang? What is that? And, a lot of people, it's happiness, okay? But again, I'm going to go back. Happiness is an emotion, is a feeling. So in this gap, you have that up and down roller coaster of that, you're happy 1 second, you're sad, you might get discouraged, might not be motivated, and so, you step back. So really, it's, you have to define what is your purpose. What do you feel is your mission in life? Onto that, and that's where fulfillment comes from, of stepping into those shoes, stepping into that person that you want to be, stepping into, and guess what? That kind of goes along with manifesting. That's the beautiful thing I feel about all of this, is that it all is intertwined. It all comes together. Spirituality and mental health. It comes, but you're the chooser. You're the co-creator in your life. And so it's, what are you focusing on? What is it? Do you constantly go into the negative? Are you constantly sitting there and doubting yourself? Do you have those limiting beliefs? Do you feed into that? Or do you stop yourself and, I'm the amazing person. I can do this, on it. And, that also builds off of, your self-esteem. How do you view yourself? And that energy that you're putting out into the world, because, a lot of people don't think that people are paying attention, but I pay attention. I see things. There's a lot of things that other people see about people that people aren't aware of. But that self-esteem, and it comes down to, again, of the Have you settled? Are you settling because this is just what you knew, this is what you know, this is what your parents did, or, whoever is, important in your life? Well, what is their purpose? What is it? Do they even have a purpose? Are you possibly following someone who has no purpose, no guidance? They're in survival mode every day. I just got to get by. I just got to get by. It's just another day. It's just another day. Well, that is a really horrible way to live. And don't get me wrong, because the fact is, I lived that way for many years, too many years, onto it until I had my wake-up call. So, you have to look at these things and you have to decide you want freedom for new experiences, freedom for that happiness. Because, the more that you step into your purpose, the more of the fulfillment. The reality also is that feeling and that emotion of happiness does become a pattern. It does become more stable, where you don't have the up and downs, as you learn to regulate your emotions, emotional maturity, growing up, you start to feel that fulfillment, and that gives you happiness, so you really step off that roller coaster onto it. So it's, really reflecting and considering your roles and everything. And so tonight I'm going to leave it short and sweet onto that, about what is your purpose? What is your mission? What actually causes you fulfillment? And I challenge you to reflect on that. I challenge you to really sit with that and think about, are you a functioning human being living by new experiences, by new creative adventures? Are you meeting new people? Are you learning new things? Or are you stuck? Are you stuck in the mud and you have no idea how to get out? You're just there. You're just there, and how boring your life is, and how you want something. Because the fact of the matter is that nothing can change in your life until you choose, till you make that decision that I want more. But what is that more? What is that going to be? What is that fulfillment that comes within you? And so that is tonight with Megan Marie, and I hope you all have enjoyed. If you caught me live, I didn't see any of your comments, and if you watched the replay, let me know what you thought, and if you want to hear more and about a certain subject, let me know. And I hope you all have a wonderful night. Namaste.